guys, how's it going? I'm Sydney from PhoneDog.com, and this is the Samsung Craft from Metro PCS. If you watched the review for this phone, you remember that I said it was one of the best messaging phones on the market, if not the best messaging phone on the market right now. Now, a lot of you may be thinking, okay, yeah, but it's on Metro PCS. I mean, is it really worth switching to Metro, a smaller, lesser known carrier, just to get this phone? Well, hopefully this Dogfight will help you to decide, okay? This is the Pantech laser. It's from AT&T, a larger, one of the 4 main carriers in the United States. And in my opinion, it's the next best messaging phone, next to the Samsung Craft. And actually, it just shot up to #1 on PhoneDog's top messaging phones list. So it's definitely a great messaging phone. So if you're trying to decide, should I stick with a main carrier or should I, make the leap and jump to Metro and get the Samsung Craft, this Dogfight will help you guys to decide that. So we're going to put them head to head, see which one comes out the winner in different categories, and then in the end, you guys can decide which one you prefer. If you want to stick with AT&T or stay with a larger carrier, or if you want to go with Metro, we'll let you guys decide that. So Pantech laser, AT&T, Samsung Craft, Metro PCS. I'm Sydney from PhoneDog.com. Let's go check it out. Okay, so on the left side is the Pantech laser from AT&T, and then the Samsung Craft is on the right side from Metro PCS. And first of all, as you can see, they're both very well designed phones, and a lot of it's going to depend on personal opinion, because obviously the Pantech laser is much thinner than the Samsung Craft. The laser, as I've said before, is the thinnest full sliding keyboard phone ever offered on AT&T. It's less than ½ an inch thick. It's actually less than 0.4 inches thick. So, and then obviously the Craft is much thicker. But both of them are built very solidly. So in terms of physical design, neither one of them really feels extremely cheap. Even though the laser is very thin, it still has a solid feel to it. It doesn't seem plasticky or hollow. And the same thing with the Craft. That was one of the things that I was really impressed with when I reviewed it, is that it has a very solid design, and so they both look great. Now, getting to the main display here, both have an AMOLED display. The Craft has a 3.3 inch display, and then the laser has a 3.1 inch display. So, generally about the same, just slightly larger on the Craft. Both AMOLED displays. Now, the weird thing is that they do look different. And this, it could be a tie because the technology is the same. Resolution is also the same, 480 by 800 on both displays. But I don't know, to me, the Craft, it just looks better. I don't know if it's just Samsung because they have more experience with AMOLED displays. You've got the Samsung Impression, which was the first major phone that had an AMOLED display, and then obviously the Galaxy S devices with a Super AMOLED display. So, I don't know if it's just that they have more experience with it. Maybe they've, they know what works and what doesn't work. But to me, it's brighter. It's more crisp, more clear. The laser, it looks great. It's an AMOLED display, so just, that by itself, the display does look very good. Compared to any other messaging device, the display looks better. But just when you're comparing it to the Craft, to me, it doesn't look as good. And so, you'll see later on whenever I go into pictures, you'll see more examples of this. But to me, the Craft does win in this case. Even though both have beautiful displays, the Craft, to me, just stood out more, seemed to have a better AMOLED display than the laser. Both touchscreen devices, obviously. Now, the Craft actually has a capacitive touchscreen, whereas the Pantech laser has a resistive touchscreen. And this is one thing that, if you're confused on it, if you watched the unboxing video, I said that the laser had a capacitive touchscreen. In fact, Pantech's website says that the laser has a capacitive touchscreen, but it actually doesn't. It's actually a resistive touchscreen, and they've since corrected it. Hopefully, I let them know. But so it is a resistive touchscreen, and so obviously, capacitive to resistive. Capacitive is just generally better. Resistive isn't bad, But most people would prefer a capacitive touchscreen, and especially so considering the quality of the Craft's capacitive touchscreen. If you think about other messaging phones that have a screen like this, I'm thinking the Sharp FX, also the LG View Plus, also the Samsung Flight 2. All three of those devices had a capacitive touchscreen, but it just wasn't great. It was not up to par with other, just, you know, compared to a smartphone, the iPhone, Galaxy S, just any other smartphone with a capacitive touchscreen. It was not up to par with those. This one is. This is, like, you know, this is what I'm talking about when it comes to capacitive touchscreens. It's very responsive, very smooth scrolling. You know, you can see there's a bit of a lag just because it is a messaging phone. The processor, you know, isn't as great. It's not a Hummingbird processor, but the screen itself is just very responsive. I definitely didn't have any problems when it came to scrolling or selecting anything. That's not a scrollable menu there, but capacitive touchscreen is definitely great on the Craft. So I'm going to give the winner there to the Craft. Now you can see they do have different UIs. There are some similarities. You know, Samsung, the Craft is using Samsung's TouchWiz interface. Not the same TouchWiz that you'll see on the Galaxy S devices, but more of the TouchWiz that's been formatted for messaging phones. And so you can pull out this widget drawer here, and then you have a couple of widgets to choose from. And then you can, of course, drag those widgets out to any screen that you'd like to have it on. So, you know, so kind of a nice interface. You know, it's one of those interfaces that I've always enjoyed, I've always liked, because it really makes it gives it sort of a smartphone feel, especially when you think about operating systems like Android and iOS too, where you have icons and widgets on the main screen. You know, usually a lot of messaging phones, it's just a main menu and you have everything there. It's just not as exciting, whereas when you have the different widgets, you know, kind of adds some spice to it. So TouchWiz UI, you know, I definitely like. Now the Pantech laser has a little bit different UI, probably something that we haven't seen very often just because Pantech, you know, isn't really known very well. You know, they don't make as many phones as Samsung does, so we've seen TouchWiz for a while. You know, we're very familiar with it, but this is kind of fresh and new, and so it actually incorporates a lot of features that TouchWiz has, but also adds a couple of new features that are really nice. For example, on the main home screen here, you have a clock, and that's pretty much all you can add to this home screen. However, as you can see, it's kind of an interesting clock. You know, it looks really different. And in fact, there's a couple of clocks to choose from. If we go to the home screen clock type, if you go to digital clock, it's just the basic digital clocks. But if you go to unique clock, you can see there's a couple of different options. And so, you know, it's just something different, you know, something different besides what we're used to seeing on every single messaging phone that comes out. Along with that, you can also change the wallpaper, obviously, and then it will stay static in the background. So you can see the wallpaper actually doesn't move. It's just the screen, or the, you know, the actual screen itself that moves. So going over to the next page, you have these sort of icon widgets, you know, sort of like TouchWiz, except displayed more in a grid format. You can actually set them free, you'll see, but I have them in a grid format. And so this is kind of nice. If you watch the review for the laser, I'll get in, you know, a little more depth into this, but it is nice to have these shortcuts. You can see I have camera, web browser, I believe. Any games, you can have a shortcut to that. You can see I have a shortcut for a scheduled event that I have coming up, and then a text message, have a shortcut to a text message, so you can just send one really quick. So kind of nice having that, and then of course you can add more if you'd like. And then going over to the next page, this is your list of your favorite contacts. And the nice thing about these two pages is that they do scroll up and down, so you don't just have, you know, this page, you actually have a little more room than it looks like. And the same thing with this page, you can actually scroll down. So that's kind of a nice feature, and then it's just your favorite contacts that you can add there. So, you know, I really like the interface on the Pantech laser. To me, in my opinion, you know, I prefer it over TouchWiz because TouchWiz is great and it's really fun, it's exciting. It brings a lot that, you know, makes it feel like a smartphone. However, the UI on the laser brings those same features, but also brings other features that are also cool. So it's like having the best of TouchWiz, but just adding, more to it. So in terms of UI, the laser definitely wins for me. All right, so moving right along to the keyboard. Obviously, they're both messaging phones, and so they both have physical keyboards. Again, it's just amazing that the laser is so thin, and yet it does have a full keyboard, and it's actually a very well designed keyboard. But both have great keyboards. A lot of it, you may have a personal preference. You may decide that you like one over the other because they are designed very differently. But for me, both of them are awesome. I could type very quickly on both of them. You can see the laser has a very thin, just not raised very much. The keys, they're kind of flat, but they're plasticky. They have a rubbery feel to them. They're not that slippery plastic, but they have a rubbery feel to them, so you can get a good grip. But it's really great. I can type pretty quickly, and didn't really have any problems. So the keyboard, definitely great on the laser. I love that it has the .com, period, comma. Just a really great keyboard. Now the Craft also has a great keyboard. I'll go to messaging. Now I went to the main menu. Go to messaging. Also has a great keyboard. I've always been a fan of Samsung's keyboards. It is a little different because you have the space bar in between a row of letters, which some people complain about. Some people don't really like that. I learned to get used to it. The layout, isn't too bad. Generally easy to type on. Another downside is that you don't have a dedicated period key. You can see you have to push function to get to it. But the keyboard actually, despite all of those things, it really wasn't that bad. I mean, I really enjoyed typing on this keyboard just as much as I did on the laser keyboard. So I'll type out a quick message, and you can see I could type pretty fast on both of them. Fox. So, both of them are going to take, just a little bit of time to get used to because they both have their strange little nuances. But really, the keyboards are a tie. And not only are they a tie, but both of these keyboards are two of the best keyboards that I've ever used. Okay, now keeping, with messaging, one major difference is that I'll go to messaging here. The Pantech laser has threaded text messaging, whereas the Samsung Craft doesn't. And that was one kind of drawback for me because, like I said in the opening, I've said basically that I think the Craft is probably one of the best messaging phones on the market, if not one of the best messaging phones ever. But it has that big drawback of that it's a messaging phone and yet it doesn't have threaded text messaging, which to some people will be kind of strange. But anyway, there it is. It doesn't have threaded text messaging, whereas you can see the laser is divided by conversations, and you'll see it shows up as different speech bubbles.